Todd McClay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It gives me a pleasure to rise and speak on the Foreign Affairs and Trade appropriations. And I want to start by saying what a hard-working government this is. The hard-working government, the work we do is typified by two very hard-working ministers, and I want to mention them in a moment and talk about the work that they're doing for the member opposite, hard work that it is. Murray McCully, who's out there improving relationships with countries and regions of the world for the good of New Zealand, and Tim Grosser, our Minister of Trade, who has great achievement in trade negotiations, free trade agreements all over the place, negotiations started. What an impressive and staggeringly hard-working minister. Now, on trade, what I want to do is just mention, it's worth mentioning, Mr. Speaker, for members opposite who are looking very sleepy so late in the afternoon, the very hard work that's been done. Signed agreements with Malaysia, Hong Kong, with Asian countries, the Asian countries, and we've started negotiations and moving towards negotiations with India, the Gulf states, Trans-Pacific Partnership, Korea, and that wonderful one over at the top of the European Union, Russia. What does this mean, Mr. Speaker? This means more work for New Zealand businesses, better access to markets. The people of my electorate, the businesses, tell me that's a great thing. What can a free trade agreement do for you? Well, let's just think about that jewel in the crown of China. Last year, when the world was in a pretty bad recession, and of course New Zealand, we know, went into recession before many other countries of the world. Well, when the world was doing it the tough way, our exports to China, because of the FTA, increased by $1 billion. $1 billion in tough times. It's two-way trade, a 15% increase of that 43% increase in trade of New Zealand companies and products towards China. I want to congratulate these two ministers and ask them to keep up that very good work. Now, I want to, as I said earlier, Mr. Speaker, New Zealand's foreign relationship is improving, Mr. Chairman, and is prospering with the world. New Zealand aid funding has increased to $169 million 2010 and 2011, and a lot more of this will be directed towards sustainable economic development. Now, in the Pacific Island countries we have a very close relationship with, this is nothing but good news for them. It means that New Zealand taxpayer funds will be directed towards making their economies more sustainable, making their businesses better, and growing their economies. And in this I want to recognise the work that's been put into the PACER Plus negotiation and look forward to more work over the current financial year and believe that the countries of the Pacific are equally committed to making sure that we can get this agreement right and that as we move forward that it not only will be a good agreement for them but will grow the relationship we and Australia have with them. It's a very important agreement to them, and because they're important to us, Mr. Speaker, it must be an important agreement to us also. I want to, for a moment, touch on China. And talk about some of that work that's been ongoing there. Our second most important trading relationship, Mr. Speaker, Mr. Chairman, the potential in China is huge. It's unbelievable. In fact, I mentioned earlier how our two-way trade has increased. The Prime Minister has set a challenge to New Zealand and New Zealand businesses to increase our trade with China to $20 billion over the next 5 years. I had an opportunity to visit China and go to Shanghai just last week with a group of Bay of Plenty exporters, a trade delegation that went to the expo in Shanghai to meet with their counterparts to promote the Bay of Plenty to them. Can I say, Mr. Chairman, that based upon the reception that our business in the Bay of Plenty got, whilst it will be hard work, this increase in two-way trade to $20 billion is more than achievable. We visited the Shanghai Pavilion. There was a number of committed and hard-working New Zealanders there representing our country. Can I say that I understand that we've had about 2.5 million Chinese people visit New Zealand this year for tourism reasons. Well, last week the 2 millionth visitor went through the New Zealand Pavilion in Shanghai, and it's unbelievable the reception that New Zealand is getting. What a worthwhile investment that was on the part of the taxpayer to promote our country to this growing market in China. Now, whilst there, we had a number of exporters from the Bay of Plenty that used this visit to very good effect. And I want to recognise a couple of them because, Mr. Speaker, Mr. Chairman, the potential New Zealand has in exporting to China is in many areas. It's in protein and the great products that our farmers produce, agricultural trade, of course, and food. fisheries, farming, New Zealand businesses like Comvita and my electorate who have brought a health product to China. Zespri, of course, with kiwi fruit. Wonderful opportunities in China, Mr. Speaker. Well done to these hard-working ministers.